real quick. There we go. Yeah, tamales. What kind? Janelle? Chicken, corn, beef. Mm. Where'd you get them? Homemade? Local? Okay. Lorena, I'll see you later. Hope you can catch the rest later. Um, Homemade. Awesome. Okay, folks. In the spirit of food, thank you, Janelle, for that brilliant segue. Let's talk about this chapter on adobo and anxiety. So, I'm going to share a little bit of context on how this came to be. So, um, yeah, I guess how do I start? I'm a sociologist. You all know this. I'm a sociology professor, and so um, like as a sociologist, I've always been trained to think that the type of writing we do has to be like a full-on study. So for a sociologist, that means doing like a big survey of like doing a huge survey, interviewing a whole lot of people, or giving them the survey and then crunching the numbers and telling a story that way, or qualitatively to do like you know like many years of ethnographic research and observations, or interview like 50 to 100 people about a certain topic, and then like analyze all your data and write about it that way. And so I've done that, and I think that it's important to do those full-on studies, because they're very robust and they help you learn about groups, and they're not anecdotal. But at the same time, one of the things I realized that I was missing is that sometimes I would go places or I have certain experiences where I didn't want to spend many years doing a whole study, and I didn't want to like go through like writing a lit review about it. But I still wanted to tell that story. And so fairly recently, I would say around 2018, I started to shift my relationships a little bit. And so instead of hanging out with other sociologists, I mean, I still have sociology friends, obviously, but instead of going to sociology conferences, I started to go to creative writing conferences just because I was like, I want to do something new. And in 2018, I went to a writing conference called Vona, which if any of you are interested in becoming writers, I highly recommend it. It stands for Voices of a New America, and it's for writers from underrepresented populations. And I happened to take a writing class with 12 people. Um, and I want to find the book because I want to show you like actually, you know what? I'm gonna pull it up because obviously I can screen share. I met this author who was my teacher, and his name was Kiese Lehman, and I adore this guy. Like Roxane Gay, they're actually friends. Like Roxane Gay, this person wrote about issues that I cared about. Oops, sorry, I said to just one person. This person wrote about issues that I cared about that like occupied my mind, but had no problem writing about those topics emotionally. So I just want to do a shameless plug for someone that I feel very indebted to that helped me make the transition from like academic writing to um, creative writing. He wrote this amazing book called Heavy. If you're like you don't have enough things to do, but if you want to find something to do over winter break and you're like needing a book, I highly recommend Heavy. It's literally like heavy topics, but man, this man can write. Wow. Talk about someone that has like it's very clear that he grew up around like hip hop culture, rap, and it's very clear that he grew up in the South. He's from Mississippi, and it's very clear that he grew up around like a black community. And what I love about that is that it shows in his writing style. Anyway, that's a total digression. The point is, I ended up taking this class with Kiese. Let me just show you a picture of him. This is him. There he is. I don't know why it's all blurred out. Like, that's weird. I don't know why it looks like that. Let me see. There's another picture. What? Kiese Layman. Images. This is him. There he is. He's amazing. I'm like, I when I met him, I was like, I didn't even know words. Like I used to be like, oh, I gotta write so I can get published, so I can advance in this career, so I can add it to my CV. And this man transformed my relationship to sentences and words, and I have to pay homage to him because he's amazing. I didn't like. He is the first. He's probably the first. Well, writing. He's my first writing instructor I've ever had, but he's the first writing teacher that showed me that like you can move the hell out of people with one sentence. You can write a 2-line email and like change someone's day or week just by the words that you assemble in that email. Um, he was someone that wasn't very much like every moment in which he either writes words or says words, he takes it as an opportunity to reshape the world that he's living in. Maybe through the form of like how he interacts with someone, maybe in the way someone reads a topic. But if there's anyone that has been so masterful with assembling sentences in a way that can really change people's minds and hearts, it is this person right here. So anyway, needless to say, like I became super enamored with Kiese Layman, his writing, anybody that he was friends with, I fell in love with. I mean, I was like, if he loves this reading and he loves these authors, then I'm gonna love him too. And so from like 2018 when I first took that class, I was like, oh, I want to write like this. And I tried and I tried really hard and I failed a lot. But you know what I had to do? I just like what I learned is that if you want to learn to write well, you gotta read. You gotta read. You gotta read as much as possible. You gotta read things and read them in a particular way, where you're like, kind of you're looking at the way that they construct sentences, you're looking at their word choice, you're looking at the rhythm of sentences. Like some sentences are long, some sentences are like 2 words. You got to look at like indentation, punctuation. Oftentimes I read my stuff out loud because I want there to be like a musicality to the way it's written, so that because a lot of people when they read, they're reading it with like a rhythm in mind without us even knowing it. I learned about writing with like a sense of musicality from Kiese. But anyway, I had many attempts between 2018 and 2020 where I was just like trying to write and I thought it was dope and it was really, really like just average. But over time, like you get enough reading, you read enough stuff, you read everything from like James Baldwin to Roxane Gay to new writers like Jose Antonio Vargas and Morgan Jerkins. You read memoir, you read fiction, you read poetry, and you know what? You kind of learn some shit after a while when you just read a lot of stuff. So, Kiese, I credit him for making me fall in love with words again. Because if there's anything that school does, and there's anything that grad school does, it totally destroys your love of reading. So, yeah, like I don't know about you, but anyone in this room feel like college like destroyed their love of reading, or is that just me?
I definitely agree in a sense.
Okay, good.
Because there
That's
are
good.
some
I'm glad
books
you
that
also
I'm
like
like,
to
why
read.
am I
So,
reading? What was it?
are people here?
I
Am I
am.
talking? Like you can hear me, right?
Yeah, of course.
Okay, sorry, I
Yeah, we
was
can
like
hear you.
oddly silent. But yeah, so I fell in love with reading and fell in love with writing in a new way because of this person. So obviously, like I want to give credit. Like I don't mention Kiese in the essay at all, but a lot of his spirit is infused in how I wrote this piece. So Part of what excites me about this piece on adobo and anxiety is that it was written about the South. It is very much embedded in the U.S. South, and a lot of times when we talk about immigration, we're always focused on L.A., San Francisco, New York, Chicago, but like yeah, Juliana, I told you that was me. College completely ruined my love of reading. So, but yeah, like the South is a place where immigration is happening, but it doesn't get talked about as much. And so, I also wanted to. I was very excited to have my very first creative writing piece be about the South because Kiese is from the South himself, and he rocks being from the South like no other. And I feel like there's some like the South gets a bad like it gets a bad rap. I think in for those of us on the coasts, we often assume that the South, like how many of you have heard stereotypes of the South? And if you have, like name some of those stereotypes in the chat or unmute yourself.
I think one of the biggest things that happens when people think about the
Oh,
South
Alexander,
is just can you hear me, Professor? Professor, can you hear me?
Oh shoot, hold on. Sorry. Uh-oh. I can't hear you because my AirPods are off. Okay.
I could hear you, Alexander.
All right, cool. Thanks, Miriam.
You're welcome.
Okay. Go ahead.
Okay, can you hear me, Professor?
Yes, I can.
All right, perfect. I think one of the biggest stereotypes, or at least for me, like when I think of the South, is pretty much like its bad history of racism and segregation, and how like sometimes in a way, like if you go to the South, you still might experience some of that, not segregation stuff, but there still might be some forms of racism because I mean, like I never like the closest I've been to the South was when I went to visit Virginia, and it was nothing like that at all. But I think if you go, I still feel that if you go to the states like such as Alabama, Tennessee, or Louisiana, there like you still might see some people who like still wave the Confederate battle flag, or you might even like I even heard rumors on how like there's still some KKK meetings that still go on like in the forests of the South, so to speak.
Yeah,
So
absolutely. Alexander, I think that what you described is the way a lot of people conceptualize the South, is
right.
that it's more racist, it's somehow more racist. It has the KKK. It has like a history of segregation and slavery. And those things are not false. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
But I think that the South is associated with a particularly pronounced version of that, which is as I've grappled with that stereotype more and more because I have friends that are Southern, and Virginia is kind of weird because Virginia, like Northern Virginia, is kind of like the North, and Southern Virginia is like it's like the one state where it can feel both Northerner and Southerner at the same time. But
Yeah. During the Civil War, it was very like if you were West Virginia fought for the Union and stuff, whereas the rest of Virginia, that was one of the Confederacy's main strongholds. So
yeah, totally. So like with the South, like all those stereotypes, I have been guilty of those stereotypes myself, especially before like I spent significant amount of time there, and didn't really know anyone from there. Funny enough, like when you think about the Klan, actually one of the most like one of the breeding grounds of like white supremacy is actually the Inland Empire of California. A lot of people don't know that Central Valley and the Inland Empire is like, I had students that are law enforcement that were gang unit, and I remember I was like, oh, what, like out of nowhere, I was like, what gangs are you focused on? And I expected my students to say like, certain things, and she was like, actually, the main focus of my gang unit is like white supremacist gangs in the Inland Empire. And I was like, oh shoot. And then when she said it, I started to like pay attention more, and I was like, wow, actually, when you look at the data, there's a lot of stuff that happens right here in our own backyard. But anyway, like California is often framed as like liberal, but it's actually more mixed. And I think that similarly, the South is actually more complicated when it comes to race relations than a lot of us imagine, because all we see about the South is stuff on like what we see on TV. So I was really excited to write about the South because I think like race, it functions very differently there. Um, Oddly enough, yes, there are pockets of the South that are segregated, but there are also places where I have seen more interaction between Black and white people in the South, like intimate interaction compared to anything I've seen in LA. And that's interesting. And then of course, when you throw in other groups that have historically not been there, like Filipinos, I was like, there's no doubt going to be an interesting story here. So anyway, this is kind of the weird, awkward part, but let's do the same thing. What's the overall plot of this essay? And I know some folks even said like, oh, I feel like I got to know you a little bit more. So if folks could chime in about what they their reactions or their assessment of the plot.
Professor.
Yeah, go ahead, Kalia.
I read this in the summer actually because obviously, as you know, I follow you on Twitter. And when I read this specific piece, I actually was in tears because I related to it as I'm always hesitant also to speak in Arabic, even though I do speak it fairly fluent, but I'm always like looking for that acknowledgement or that
Mhm.
acceptance within the culture. And this specifically, it just touched me, and just like that sense of acknowledgement is always like so important, especially from the elders or just people, because oftentimes we're seen as, oh, you're just American, you're just this. But I'm like, no, I am very much Arab, you are very much Filipino. So it's like a beautiful story. But the main thing is of Rose, that she was formerly a nurse, and
Mhm.
then she started off with the little cart in the hospital. She did the Filipino food cart, wasn't it?
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
And then after that, she began her own food business, and that's when you happened to visit in Savannah, Georgia. But yeah, it's just a beautiful story. If anyone wants to speak, because I'm like,
No, I feel you on that. The language thing. Oh my gosh,
yeah,
talk about like you want to see me stumble and be insecure.
yeah,
Ask me to speak Tagalog and ask me to speak Tagalog in front of like if it's around strangers, if
yeah.
I've had like one or two shots of tequila, it's fine. But like if it's around family, I'm just
Mhm.
like I will turn bright red. Even the talking about speaking Tagalog around my family makes me like stressed out just to mention it, you know?
Them to correct, oftentimes I'm like, oh man, they're probably going to be like, oh, you said this incorrectly, because there are so many variants within our languages. So it's like, oh, I hope I said the right, even in gender specifications when speaking, I'm like, I hope I said this, because as is there's standard, and then there's the more colloquial. So I'm like, okay, make sure to get this. But
Oh yeah, that's true. There's formal and informal. Like in the
yeah.
essay, I talk about like if you use there's a term po, right? In Spanish, there's usted and tú, which is different. What is it in the language that you're like? How does formal and informal sound? Give me an example.
I'll speak a sentence. So I'll say in formal standard Arabic, which can be, that's what's taught in schools and in newspapers. That's mostly what's spoken. Formal Arabic, like if you're to say, how are you? كيف حالك for a man, كيف حالك for a female.
Uh-huh.
And then in Jordanian dialect, you could say كيف حالك, كيف حالك,
Oh
and
wow.
that will be understood largely. It's still very similar, or you could say shlonak, shlonik. There are so many variants to what you can say, like what you're able to say. But then, like, I'm trying to think. Okay, for female you say untha, for male you say rajul, and that's for formal. For like informal, you'll say bint, a walad. So you're
Hmm.
always like, okay, like how do I? So it's like so many things. You're always like having to study it, and I always try to rehearse, especially when I'm to speak in front of elderly people. I'm like, okay, let me make sure I got this right.
Oh yeah, I'm always like, if I'm around somewhere, I'm like running it through my head, and then it sounds, and then there's an issue of like it sounds amazing in my head, and then when I open my mouth, it's a disaster. So, no, I feel you, Christina. You mentioned something about getting, and then we'll get to Alexander. I want to make sure that I acknowledge that you have your hand raised. Christina, you said I get so nervous speaking Spanish to my family and my boyfriend's family. Yes. Talk about that.
Well, my boyfriend's family predominantly speaks Spanish. Yes, they do speak English, but out of respect, I do my best to speak Spanish to them. And I'm always like tripping on my words, if you can say. Like I'm always like, oh, ¿cómo se dice? And his mom, she's very understanding, and she's always like, I love that you try, and she'll help me, but I'm like, if we had like a family party and his tias are there, I'm like, oh my God, I sound like I'm a bumbling idiot. Like, and then I get really nervous, and then I like completely shut down, because then I'm like, I sound retarded. Like I sound
we don't say it.
I sound so awful. And his
Yes,
sister's so sweet, and she'll always like correct me and like help me along.
Yeah.
And I always find myself like stumbling and getting very like so if I can hear the conversation and I can add something, it's like Aaliyah said, I feel like I'm practicing in my head before I say it out loud.
Yeah,
And
it's
I'm like, oh, did I
totally.
say that right? Did I address them properly? Like, oh, it's so, especially in like a family party setting where you have to be like, you know, respectful to your elders and respectful to like your aunts and your uncles, and you know, you're trying to make a good impression. And I'm like, oh God, did I say that? Oh, I was so bad.
No, I totally feel you. I just this language, like, this is like total second gen, like like hashtag second gen problems, because like, it's the language thing. Just, oh, I wish I actually spent like 3 weeks ago. I told my mom in a bout of courage, I'm gonna start speaking Tagalog, like to you and dad. And I did it for like an hour. No, maybe like 10 minutes. I'm lying. And then like they were like, "What happened?" But when I would make a mistake, they like laughed, and I felt all embarrassed. So it's yeah, I don't know. It's hard. I think that it's hard. Alexander, go ahead. You had your hand raised.
Yeah, no, like a professor, like kind of like going back off of what Glyla was talking about, like it just reminds me so much of my experience of when I went to last winter. I actually went to my mom's home country in Chile, South America, and
Uh-huh.
it was just my mom and myself, and I actually like stayed there for a month because first of all, my cousin was getting married,
Uh-huh.
and also like my mom told me that I had relatives there that I didn't even know I had, and she wanted me to visit them, but they lived all throughout the country. So in order for that to work, we had to stay for about a month. And by then I was already like was speaking Spanish, like so to speak. But
Mm-hmm.
one thing that completely threw me off, and this even caught my mom off guard as well, because even though she's like from Chile, she hasn't
Uh-huh.
been there in such a long time. And so when I would speak with some of my uncles and my relatives, they would use these totally different terms, and some of which like I didn't even know were part of the Spanish language. And the best example that I can
Yeah,
come
give me
up
an
with,
example. Yeah, let me
yeah,
hear.
the best example like would be like first of all, like at around that time, like I was in a I was relating, I was dating someone, I was dating this one girl, and so everyone was curious about it. They
Of
were
course.
they all wanted like to know about it. Like, but the thing is that when I would tell them that like I would show her like a photo and be like, "Ella es mi novia," and they would all be surprised because in Chile, novia actually stands for fiance and stuff. Bolola,
Oh,
Bolola stands for like a just like a girlfriend, you know?
Lola.
Yeah, Bolola
Oh,
is how.
Balola.
Yeah, that's how you would say it, and even like, and pretty much like yeah, like it just caught me completely off guard, and there were, and that was just one of so many other terms. Like I'm having a hard time trying to think of other ones, but that one was like the most common, and I pretty much like said to myself, oh my God, I just gave everyone the wrong idea.
Oh yeah,
But
and one small word, it's like there's a lot of words that in the different contexts it means very different things. Like I don't want to use this word in Spanish. Should I?
Just
Okay, how do you say catch in Spanish?
how do you say what?
Catch.
I got
What's
it.
Agarrar.
Yeah.
okay.
Agarra.
Oh no, I'm thinking a different word. Okay. I learned this word. Oh, how do you say take in Spanish?
I think it's the same, no? Agarrar.
Agarra.
Okay.
Tomar. O
Okay.
tomar.
The mud, yeah. That'll work.
Tomar is take, right? But I don't know in what Spanish textbook I had, but where it was made or what type of Spanish to use, but somewhere along the way, I was taught that the word catch is coger.
Oh, yes, that's like
C-O,
proper.
yeah, Coger. And so, but in certain contexts, coger is obviously not the word to use, right?
Yeah.
It means something totally different. For those that are familiar with Filipino food, there is a Filipino dessert that looks like a white little rice cake.
Oh,
It
yes,
looks
my
like
friend brought some.
yeah.
Sunday.
Did your friend tell you what the name of that rice cake
I,
was?
I remember it was puto or pito or something like that.
It's the first one you said.
Yeah, I remember. And she brought
Yeah.
it to my Spanish class, actually.
Uh-huh.
And she told us how like that's the name, and we're like, oh, that's cool, like
Yeah.
that means different in like Spanish, but
Yeah. Imagine a random Filipino person in high school like bringing like food for like Spanish class. It's like, everyone, I brought puto, right?
yeah,
What's gonna happen in that Spanish like language can lead to very awkward moments. I know, right? I don't know. See, for me as a Filipino, the word doesn't have the same meaning. So like, but every time I say it and I'm around folks that grew up around Spanish, they're like, "Oh my God, did you just say that?" And so it's yeah, it has words in the wrong context. Alexander, you gave an example. Oh yeah, you talked about the context mattering as well. It can there's a lot of moments that can happen. And even like Salvadoran Spanish, it sounds different from Mexican Spanish and Puerto Rican Spanish. There are just certain words that it's not the same. For folks that are from like Central American backgrounds, like what are certain words in Spanish in Central America that are different from say like Mexican Spanish?
All right, Professor Well, something that resonated with me when you wrote about in your article is when you know how she was telling you, oh, where are you from and where are your parents from?
Uh-huh.
And that reminded me so much. Every time I went to the grocery store, like, like Mexican grocery stores like Cardenas or El Super, there
Uh-huh.
were always Mexican registered ladies.
Uh
They were always asking me, oh, where are your parents from?
uh-huh.
She kind of figured I was born here because, and she's like, I'm like, oh, Michoacán y Guerrero. And then they're always making fun of how Guerrero people talk. And
Oh,
it's,
really?
yes.
How do folks from Guerrero talk?
Well, let me tell you. Okay. Well, in Spanish, niña y niño is boy and girl, right?
Uh-huh. Yeah.
But how my dad says it in Guerrero is guacha.
Watcha.
Uh-huh.
right,
And then the kids is watches.
Watches. Watch it
Yeah.
and watches.
Isn't that funny? So every
What
time
is-
they'll say something, they'll be like, they'll be like, oh, niña is guacha and watches. And I'm like, yeah. And I'll just start laughing because it's so true.
Oh my gosh. I didn't know that there was that. Wait, let me look at a map. I'm gonna pull up a Mexican map real quick. Mexico map. Because that is amazing.
Yeah.
There's like a lot of states. Where is this? I need like one with the
It's
state
like right
names.
next to Michoacan too, but it's just like so different the way they say it. Like neck, they say buche instead of saying cuello, like
Puche?
yeah, buche, like el buche. Like I'm like, okay, dad, like he talks really different than my mom does,
Yeah. No, that's funny because my mom and dad are from different regions of the Philippines. And I remember when my dad would talk to his mother-in-law, my mom's mom, she would say some random words. And my dad was like, what the hell is this? And they would lead to these really funny moments. So I'm looking at a map. This is
Guerrero
is where
right
are we?
next to Michoacan. I'm thinking
Michoacan is over.
He just
Oh my
came back
God.
from Mexico too. I think he says that he arrived in Toluca.
Where's the one with the states? This is not the one I want. This is like cities.
Yeah, there's cities. So
Let's see. Let's find the one. Mexico map
right here, I think
states.
right next there. Oh,
Here. Okay, this one's quite colorful.
yeah.
Is it? Oh my gosh, I can't even see. Oh, there's Michoacan. Okay. So,
It's right there, right at the bottom. See?
all right. Oh yeah, they're next to each other.
They're right next to each other, yeah. And they talk so different. They talk so different. And my mom's like, my mom always sees them like ghetto. You know what I mean? Like he considers them as ghetto.
Why? And it's an interesting thing because the way in which people speak, it's not
Yeah.
just like differences. They're associated with like that. Your mom is associating with a certain. Like there's
Yeah.
I don't want to say stigma, but there's a connotation if you speak a certain way.
Yeah.
Totally. So it's not just like you speak the language or you don't speak the language. If you use certain words, it already sort of signals to people that you have a particular experience. That's super powerful.
For sure.
Any Yucatecos in here or folks from like over here, Central America?
Mm.
There's words in Salvadoran Spanish that I like. What's the word for slipper in Salvadoran Spanish? Is it still chancla?
I don't know. My grandma would say her chanclas were like her slippers, her sandals. Everything was like her chancla, and she hated to wear shoes. If it wasn't something comfy, she'd be like, "Oh, tráeme mis chanclas."
Yeah, it's funny, and I think that there's so much diversity in these regions, and yeah, so that's so funny. Like maybe in certain contexts, like I mean, my parents are from a country where people rarely wear shoes. In some places, they just wear slippers or sandals. So it's real. Yeah, there's all these little moments. I remember I went to the Philippines my first time. I'm trying to write an essay about that and how everybody was drinking soda from a plastic bag, and I thought it was the coolest thing. So I started to drink soda from a plastic bag when I came back to the United States. Because I was like, ooh, look at me. So anyway, yeah, go ahead. Consuelo.
Yeah, when I went to Mexico too, when I was younger, they'll serve the soda in the bag with the straw.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so food experiences are very much central. Food and language experiences. They're all sort of, if you think about a Venn diagram, which is like the overlapping circles, food, language, immigration, they're all related to each other, which is very, very cool. So I'm glad that the essay sort of triggered ideas or memories that maybe you haven't thought of in a while, or you thought about and didn't think anyone would ever write about in a different context. So what other things did you notice about the gravy essay? There's some economic things going on, entrepreneurial things, there's obviously language and culture things, there's generational things, there's a whole lot of stuff we could talk about.
Professor, your experience overall like stood out to me, especially like going to Georgia and like not finding any Filipino food. I went to Alabama to see some of my dad's side of the family, and I was like, oh, this is different. Like we went to the grocery store, and I think I wanted like hot Cheetos or something that like, you can get any corner store in LA. And my aunt was like, oh baby, what is that? We don't have that here. And I was like, huh? And then
hot Cheetos.
And then we were making like tuna sandwiches or something. And I
Uh-huh.
was like, oh well, do you have cilantro? She's like, you mean cilantro? And I was like, cilantro. She's like, okay, whatever, however you're gonna say it. She goes, you don't put that in your tuna. And I was like, yes, you do. I
Oh
was like, you
wow.
just put it on top. And I remember like when you first talked about like wanting to find the food, I remember when I was there, I was like, oh my God, I just need a burrito. Like, I don't feel comfortable. And my grandma was like, you're really homesick for food. And I said, yes, like it doesn't feel the same. And she's like, well, yeah, we're not home.
Oh my God, Christina, I totally understand you. I used to live in Pomona. I lived in Pomona all my life. And then I just recently moved to Yucaipa.
Oh girl, I
Oh
get it.
my no! I'm an hour away from my family now. Okay, so I go to the grocery store. They only have a Stater Brothers and a Vons here. Okay, there's no Cardenas, there's no El Super, there's none of that. So I
Yeah.
wanted to make chile rellenos. So I told that there's all kinds of cheeses, but I need a cotija cheese. So I
Mhm.
told the lady, I told the two white ladies that were there, I said, do you have cotija cheese? And she's like, huh? And I'm like, yeah, cotija cheese. And she
Uh-huh.
say it again? And I'm like, oh my God. I was like, cotija cheese. I'm not gonna whiten it up because I can't. That's the way you say it.
Uh-huh.
Like, oh, I think that type of cheese, you'll find it over there, like in the other side. And I'm like, oh, okay. So I go and I was like, man, she's probably thought I said quesike, like a cacique, like the cheese that's fresh. And I didn't want that one. But then I
Uh-huh.
found it and I was so happy. I was like, oh my God, they have it here.
Oh, that's good. Otherwise, you'd have to take a field trip all the way back to Pomona to go to
Yes,
the,
I know. And it's
you
kind of
know,
hard, it's kind of hard because it's not like there's a lot of white people here.
and it's just it's new. And I think immigration, that's the thing. Oftentimes the first moment of collision, and this is something that she talks about a lot when I was interviewing her. A lot of the moments with collision have to do with food. Food is a really interesting thing because on the one hand, food is able to create community. This is
Yes.
the one woman who has a Filipino restaurant in the entire Savannah area within like a 3-hour radius. And because it's the only place, it's where you can send it's called like buy-in boxes. You can send these boxes to the Philippines at a restaurant. You can order Filipino television cable at a restaurant. You can buy tickets for Filipino concerts in Florida at a restaurant. It becomes just like one-stop shop for all things. Because at the quote unquote mainstream grocery stores, all of the ethnic stuff gets relegated. It's like all of it gets relegated to like the ethnic aisle. So you'll have like the soy sauce and the Goya, and then like that's it, right? And so it's food is the great community maker, but it can also, as you mentioned, be the great divider where it really exacerbates moments of difference. That's why food, I think, is like, I wish there was a major that was all about, oh, don't we have food studies here at Cal Poly? But like there's so much sociological stuff to food. It's amazing that we don't have a sociology of food class because food has so much meaning, especially for the topic of immigration. It's often the thing that helps mainstream context understand who people are because they usually try out the food. It's like their gateway. I don't, not to minimize drug use, but like the gateway drug to like learning about other people's culture. So Yucaipa, there's not one Latino grocery store in Yucaipa or Palm Springs or something.
No, there's not. There's no like no like the nearest one is gonna be like in Redlands, and it's like 20 minutes.
Mm,
I got a newspaper on it. It's called something Ranchito, and it gave me the feeling that I was like, oh, maybe there's Mexican bread in this one.
nope.
I haven't gone to go see it yet. I haven't gone, but yeah, Yucaipa. All you see here is just there's one Vons and one Stater Brothers. That's it. That's like the only.
Yeah. Yeah, that's tough. I was in Seafood City, the Filipino restaurant in West Covina, and I was doing some research, and the first person I met, she was like, "I'm from Palm Springs. We had to drive all the way over here to get, I don't know, certain type of papaya or whatever." Yeah, yeah. She wanted like fish sauce and other very distinctly Filipino things. So
It's very true, Professor. When my cousins travel to Colombia, they take hot Cheetos with them. It's so funny that like that's the thing that I keep coming back to, but like such a
yeah.
creature comfort of here. But even like what did she take last time? Um what did she take? She took ketchup. And I said, "Why are you taking ketchup?" And she goes, "Because what they have over there is not the same." She's like, "It's very like vinegary." She's like, "When you're eating like your potatoes like for breakfast and you want like regular ketchup," she's like, "I feel like I doused my food with vinegar." And so I remember she packed an extra suitcase of Cheetos, a bottle of ketchup, and like snacks from here. And she's like, "Because it's never gonna be the same." She's like, "Yes, I love the food when I'm there, but
Mhm.
trust me, there's some things that you just gotta have."
Oh man, because what's the thing about what does food remind you of? What is the ultimate reason why food matters?
Home.
Home. It reminds you of home. So yeah, immigration, like a humongous theme in immigration this class is, where do people feel most at home? It's the perpetual theme that we're always coming back to with immigration. It's like, when do people feel at home? Where do they feel at home? What are the things that make them feel at home? And obviously, like food, as much as we don't usually think of it as an academic topic, it's like a big deal. So I'll give some time next week to if you have further questions on this. I want to be respectful of people's time because we've been on the phone for we've been on here for 2 hours, and so but this was fun. I hope that, like, whether you're like, just want to try out a different format. I feel like we were on a radio show together or a podcast and we were just talking, but like I said, I feel like talking and discussing and having it be all like free flowing, improvisational and organic, like, what better way to learn how to talk about this very complicated issue in real life than practicing here every Friday on like, I was gonna say Zoom, but like with each other. So I hope everybody has a good weekend. Email me if you have random questions or follow-ups. And we'll talk next week. Oh, hey, mom, enjoyed your class. So yeah, no way. What's up? Shout out to Janelle's mom. Please feel free to like come anytime. I'm always happy to have random guests. And I know some people wanted to see me after class, so I'm gonna stick around. But it was great to see you. Tune in to the next episode, absolutely. And for those that actually listen to it later, it's nice to, I hope you feel connected to everybody even though we don't see each other live. So I'll see everybody later.
Weekend.
Yeah, of course.
Thank you so much.
No problem. So everyone feel free to like log out. Otherwise, for the people that ask questions, I'm gonna move everyone to the waiting room so that I can chat with folks. So
Thank you, Professor.
of course. Thank you for making class super fun.
Thank you.
Okay, you stop the recording.